They told me I could sit near the back, quietly, of course, just so I wouldn't draw attention. At my son's wedding. The same wedding I spent over a year planning, and paid for, down to the last overpriced flower. I wasn't even listed in the program. No speech. No walk down the aisle. Just a seat. Like some distant uncle who got invited out of politeness. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I love my son. But when I realized they went out of their way to keep me hidden, like I was some kind of embarrassment, something inside me snapped. I wore that smile. I shook hands. I watched strangers take credit. And all the while, they had no idea who was really footing the bill for this picture-perfect day. But here's the thing, you can only treat someone like they're invisible for so long before they remind you exactly how seen they should be. And when I finally stood up, when I told everyone the truth, I didn't just crash the wedding. I burned the mask they'd made me wear. The mask, it had been suffocating me for years. A carefully constructed facade of quiet acceptance, woven with threads of disappointment and swallowed pride. My ex-wife, Patricia, had always been the social butterfly, the one who knew how to work a room, charm the birds from the trees, and apparently, erase me from the narrative of our son's life. She'd remarried a man named Richard, a man with money and influence, a man who saw me as a faded photograph in a dusty album. And together, they'd orchestrated this elaborate charade, this perfect wedding, where I was nothing more than a ghost in the background. The champagne flutes clinked, the string quartet played a saccharine melody, and the air hung thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken tension. I sat there, in my assigned seat near the back, watching the carefully curated tableau unfold. Every laugh, every toast, every whispered conversation felt like a tiny pinprick, deflating the carefully constructed composure I'd clung to. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a slow burn that started in my gut and spread outwards, threatening to consume me. I remember thinking, absurdly, about the caterers. I'd spent hours agonizing over the menu, ensuring it was just right, a perfect blend of sophistication and comfort. Now, I watched strangers devour those meticulously chosen dishes, oblivious to the sacrifice and care that had gone into every bite. It was a microcosm of my entire existence in their world, unseen, unappreciated, erased. The speeches began. Richard, puffed up like a preening peacock, spoke of David, my son, as if he'd sprung fully formed from his own loins. He talked about guidance, about support, about the unwavering love of a father. My hand tightened around the stem of my champagne glass, the crystal cold against my burning skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout, "He's my son. I'm the one who taught him to ride a bike, who bandaged his scraped knees, who read him bedtime stories until his eyelids drooped." But I didn't. I sat there, silent, the mask firmly in place. Then Patricia spoke. Her voice, smooth as silk, dripped with manufactured sentimentality. She spoke of David's childhood, of his triumphs and struggles, weaving a narrative that conveniently omitted my presence. She even managed to work in a thinly veiled jab about the importance of stable, consistent parenting, a clear dig at my less-than-perfect past. The burn in my gut intensified, a knot of anger and resentment tightening with each carefully chosen word. It was during David's speech that something finally snapped. He stood there, tall and handsome, the spitting image of his mother, and thanked everyone who had made his special day possible. He thanked Richard, he thanked Patricia's parents, he thanked his friends, but he didn't thank me. Not a single word. It was as if I didn't exist. As if I hadn't poured my heart and soul, not to mention my life savings, into this extravagant affair. The mask shattered. I felt a surge of reckless abandon, a primal need to reclaim my place, to shatter the illusion they'd so carefully constructed. I stood up, the scraping of my chair against the polished floor echoing through the hushed room. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of surprise and annoyance flickering across their faces. For a moment, I hesitated, the weight of years of silence pressing down on me. Then, I took a deep breath and spoke. "I think there's been a slight oversight," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The room fell silent, the clinking of silverware and the murmur of conversations abruptly ceasing. "I believe someone's been left out of the thank yous." Patricia's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Richard shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. David looked at me, a mixture of confusion and embarrassment clouding his features. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I'm the one who paid for all of this. Every last flower, every bite of food, every note of music, it all came from me." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Whispers and gasps punctuated the silence. Patricia's face paled, her carefully applied makeup unable to mask the shock and anger that contorted her features. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "I thought it was important to celebrate my son's happiness," I said, my gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the startled eyes of the guests. "Even if it meant being relegated to the shadows. Even if it meant being treated like an unwelcome guest at my own son's wedding." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken tension. Then, I turned to David, my gaze locking with his. "Son," I said, my voice softening, "I love you. And that's why I did this. Not for recognition, not for thanks, but because I wanted you to have the perfect day. Even if it meant I had to be invisible." I could see the conflict warring in his eyes, the confusion, the shame, the dawning realization of the truth. And in that moment, I knew I'd done the right thing. I'd burned the mask. I'd reclaimed my place. And I'd finally made myself seen. The silence stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. David's face, a canvas of conflicting emotions, was a mirror of my own internal turmoil. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, his shoulders slumped, the carefully constructed facade of the happy groom crumbling under the weight of the truth. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Just a strangled gasp, a choked sob that echoed the unspoken apologies I'd longed to hear for years. Patricia, however, recovered quickly. Her initial shock morphed into a cold, controlled fury. Her eyes, narrowed slits of ice, bored into me, radiating a venomous blend of anger and humiliation. "How dare you," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the force of a hurricane. "How dare you ruin this day?" Richard, ever the protector, placed a hand on her arm, a gesture meant to soothe, but which only seemed to fuel her rage. He rose to his feet, his face a mask of controlled displeasure. "I think it's time you left," he said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "This is a private family affair." A wave of nausea washed over me. A private family affair. My own son's wedding, a celebration I'd single-handedly financed, was now a private family affair from which I was being excluded. The irony was almost too much to bear. "Family?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Is that what we are now?" I seem to recall a time when I was considered part of this family. A time before I was conveniently erased from the picture. The murmurs in the crowd intensified, the whispers now laced with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. I could feel their gazes upon me, dissecting my every word, my every gesture. I was no longer a ghost in the background. I was the center of attention, the unwelcome disruption to their carefully orchestrated performance. "This isn't about you," Patricia spat, her voice dripping with venom. "This is about David's happiness. And you're ruining it." "His happiness?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this charade, this elaborate lie, is what makes him happy? You think erasing his father from his life, pretending I don't exist, is what's best for him?" David finally found his voice. "Dad," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "please. Just go." The word hit me like a physical blow. Dad. He'd called me Dad. It was the first time he'd used the word in years, and it was a plea for me to disappear. The pain was a sharp, searing agony that ripped through me, leaving me breathless and hollow. I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd loved unconditionally, and saw a stranger looking back at me. A stranger shaped by the lies and manipulations of others, a stranger who had been taught to be ashamed of his own father. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll go." I turned and walked away, the weight of their gazes heavy on my back. I walked past the lavish floral arrangements, past the tables laden with gourmet food, past the smiling faces of people who had no idea of the sacrifice and heartbreak hidden beneath the surface of this perfect day. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and out into the cool night air. As I stood there, on the sidewalk, the sounds of the celebration fading behind me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The mask was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The charade was over. And while the pain of rejection was raw and agonizing, I knew, deep down, that I had done the right thing. I had spoken my truth. I had reclaimed my voice. And even though it had cost me everything, I was finally free. But the story didn't end there. As I walked away from the glittering facade of my son's wedding, I had no idea that I was walking into a far more complex and dangerous reality. A reality where the lies and secrets ran deeper than I could have ever imagined, and where the stakes were far higher than just a seat at the wedding table. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call that would change everything. It was the police. They had found Richard's body. He was dead. The news hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the remnants of my anger and resentment, replacing them with a chilling sense of dread. Richard, the man who had stolen my wife, the man who had erased me from my son's life, was gone. And suddenly, I was the prime suspect. The police questioned me for hours, probing, insinuating, trying to paint me as a jealous, vengeful ex-husband. They pointed to my outburst at the wedding, my public humiliation of Richard, as evidence of my motive. They even brought up my financial struggles, suggesting that I had killed Richard for his money. I denied everything, of course. I had nothing to do with Richard's death. But my denials fell on deaf ears. The evidence, circumstantial as it was mounting against me. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I was trapped in a nightmare, a web of lies and deceit that threatened to consume me. I knew I had to clear my name. I had to find the real killer. But how could I, a man with no resources, no connections, no influence, unravel a mystery that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day? I started my own investigation, retracing my steps, revisiting the events of the wedding, searching for any clue, any piece of information that could lead me to the truth. And as I delved deeper into the lives of those around me, I began to uncover a hidden world of secrets and betrayals, a world where nothing was as it seemed. I discovered that Richard was not the man he pretended to be. He had enemies, powerful enemies, who had reason to want him dead. I also learned that Patricia was hiding something big, something that could have been the motive for murder. And even David, my own son, seemed to be harboring secrets of his own. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. I was being followed, threatened, warned to stay away. But I couldn't stop. I had to know who killed Richard. I had to clear my name. And most importantly, I had to protect my son, even if he didn't want my protection. The mask was gone, but the battle had just begun. And I was determined to fight, no matter the cost. My investigation began with the guests at the wedding. I revisited the hotel, securing a list of attendees, and started making calls. Most were unhelpful, offering platitudes and veiled dismissals. They remembered me, of course, the disruptive father, the scene I'd caused. But their memories were conveniently hazy when it came to details about Richard. Then, a breakthrough. A distant cousin of Patricia's, a woman named Susan, remembered overhearing a heated argument between Richard and another man at the wedding reception, just before the speeches. She couldn't identify the man, but she remembered snippets of their conversation. Something about a deal gone sour and a price to pay. This sliver of information was enough to ignite a new spark of hope. Richard had been involved in something shady, something that had made him enemies. I needed to find out what that something was. My search led me to Richard's business dealings. He was a venture capitalist, investing in various startups. I dug through public records, financial reports, anything I could get my hands on. The deeper I delved, the murkier the waters became. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, suspicious transactions, it was a labyrinth of financial deception. And at the center of it all was a company called Novatech, a promising tech startup that had recently gone public, its stock price skyrocketing. Richard had been one of the early investors. Then, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. I discovered that Novatech's success was built on a lie, a fabricated technology that didn't actually exist. The company was a house of cards, destined to collapse. And Richard knew it. He'd been quietly selling off his shares, cashing out before the inevitable crash. He'd cheated his investors, ruined lives, and walked away with millions. Suddenly, the motive for his murder became crystal clear. He'd made a lot of enemies, people who had lost everything because of his deception. Any one of them could have been the killer. But who? I needed proof, something concrete to take to the police. I continued my investigation, focusing on Novatech and its investors. I learned that one of the biggest losers in the Novatech collapse was a man named Victor Sterling, a ruthless businessman known for his volatile temper and his penchant for revenge. He had invested heavily in Novatech, and Richard's betrayal had cost him a fortune. I found Sterling. He was a formidable presence, exuding an aura of power and menace. I confronted him with my suspicions, laying out the evidence I'd gathered. He denied everything, of course, but I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. I knew I was close. I just needed one final piece of the puzzle to connect him to Richard's murder. That piece came from an unexpected source, David. He'd been distant and withdrawn since the wedding, wrestling with the revelations about his stepfather and the lies he'd been fed his entire life. But he finally broke down, confessing that he'd seen Sterling arguing with Richard on the night of the wedding. He hadn't understood the context of their conversation at the time, but now, it all made sense. With David's testimony and the evidence I'd gathered, the police finally had enough to arrest Sterling. He was charged with Richard's murder, and the truth about Novatech and Richard's deception came to light. The scandal rocked the financial world, and Richard's carefully constructed image of success and respectability crumbled into dust. In the aftermath of the arrest, David and I slowly began to rebuild our relationship. The years of silence and resentment began to melt away, replaced by a fragile but growing trust. He finally understood the sacrifices I'd made for him, the lengths I'd gone to protect him, even from a distance. He apologized for his harsh words at the wedding, for the pain he'd caused me. And I, in turn, apologized for my own mistakes, for the ways I'd failed him as a father. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars of the past remained, a reminder of the lies and betrayals that had almost torn us apart. But we were finally on the path to healing, to forging a new relationship built on honesty and understanding. I had lost so much: my wife, my home, my financial security. But I had gained something far more valuable: my son. The mask was gone, the battle was over, and I was finally free to be the father I was always meant to be. The wedding, the spectacle of it all, the humiliation, the revelation, the death, the investigation, it had all been a crucible. And what emerged was not the man I was, but the man I was always supposed to be. A father, flawed but present, finally seen, finally heard, finally free. The quiet moments after the storm are often the most profound. The dust settles, the echoes fade, and you're left with the raw, unfiltered truth. In the stillness, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous journey I'd been through. The wedding, a spectacle of opulence and deception, had been the catalyst for a chain of events that had shaken my world to its core. It had exposed the lies, the betrayals, the carefully constructed facades that had kept me at arm's length from my own son. But it had also led me to a truth more valuable than any material possession: the unwavering bond between a father and his son. We were rebuilding, brick by brick, a foundation of honesty and understanding. It wasn't easy. There were days filled with awkward silences and lingering resentments. But there were also moments of genuine connection, of shared laughter and quiet understanding, that reminded me why I had fought so hard. I had lost so much, but I had gained something infinitely more precious: a second chance. A chance to be the father I was always meant to be, present, engaged, and finally free from the weight of the past. The journey had been arduous, but the destination was worth every ounce of pain. If you enjoyed this story of family secrets, hidden truths, and the enduring power of love, then be sure to subscribe to this channel. We delve into the mysteries of the human heart, exploring the complexities of relationships and the resilience of the human spirit. Hit the like button to show your support and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on our next gripping narrative. There are more stories to be told, more secrets to uncover, and we're here to guide you through the labyrinth of human experience, one captivating story at a time.